right, so we're just past the top of the hour, so we're going to get started. So let's get into art mode. Any troubles, anything's going on that distracts you from taking the hour for yourself, this special time, just set that in the parking lot or set it aside for 1 hour. Give yourself this gift of time, and we'll just take a few deep breaths and hold at the top of the breath. And just slowly let it out, or fast let it out, but just pause at the top of your breath for a moment. And as you let it out, just drop your shoulders down. So just really give yourself a good opening in this area, which will help you in all facets of your life, not just in art class, but it will help you be a little more relaxed during this time. So let's just take a deep breath in. And hold it and release. Drop those shoulders. Another deep breath in and release. And one more deep breath in and release. And just give those shoulders a little shake. Sometimes we get tension in here, so just give ourselves some space. And with that, we'll need 2 containers of water. I keep one clear, one for cleaning brushes, and one just plain water. We'll need some brushes. I have a number of different brushes. I have 3s. I think I have a 5 here, and I do have a 10. If you have a bigger brush, a little bit bigger, might be good because we're going to cover lots of water. If you have bigger than this, might be helpful too. A 10, a 12, or even bigger than that. It's up to you. But I use these number 3 smaller brushes, getting into little areas for finer lines. We'll also want a toothbrush because we're going to do some splashes on our canvas to make those water droplets. I got these a few years ago at the dollar store, and I think you can buy 4 for $1, $1.25 if you go to Dollar Tree. And our colors today are blue and black and white. So because we're adding white onto a watercolor, when we add white, we have to change the name. It's no longer called a watercolor. It will now, once we add white, we'll call it a mixed media piece of artwork. Black that I use, I have lamp black. I'm going to use ultramarine blue. And I'm going to use something called Chinese white. I tried a different white, but the Chinese white seems to give me a nice coverage, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and use. And paper towel. So when we're going to do the splashes on the Orca, we'll use paper towel just to cover over the spots that we don't want the splashes to go. So we'll use that just to cover. So if you have a piece of tape, you're able just to attach that somehow just for a few moments. That would be handy. Or if you've got yours laying flat, you don't need to tape it on because you're not on an easel, unless you are on an easel. If you're using a canvas, then the same colors apply, lamp black or whatever black you've got. Ultramarine blue if you've got that. The sky, we're going to do ultramarine blue as well, but we're going to do it with a lot of water, so it's really fairly light. So I've got my tape ready for when I'm going to put my canvas on, or for when I'm going to put my paper towel on, but that's not for a long time from now. So on this diagram, we have a line at the top. This top will be sky, this little piece at the top. The rest is water. There is a line underneath the Orca, and down below will be darker because that's deeper water. So the top part will be sky, this is water, and then more water down here. This dark part is what defines the top of the water and the distance. So this gives us an idea that the water is that far back, and that this Orca is closer to us. Mine is vertical. If you've already drawn it horizontal, leave it. You'll just have more water to paint. We're going to start with some color. actually we're going to start with some water, and then we'll start putting some color on. So I have my Orca ready. I'm just putting water, plain water, on the sky part only. So if you've got only 1 inch up there or a 1/2 inch, just get that 1/2 inch wet. So we're just doing that small part up the top just with clear water. So if you're not sure if everything has been covered with this clear water, then just tip it to the side and see the light shadow and see if there's any dry spaces, just touch them with your brush. So then I'm just going to dip my brush onto my ultramarine, but I want a very, very light coating. So it almost doesn't look like I'm putting any blue on there, but I'm just, so it's wet on wet, but I want it very, very light. This is the sky in the background. So it's going to have a color, but it's going to look, when it dries, it's going to look almost white. But I've got a little bit different variation in some spots where there's just a little bit more blue. So don't be too concerned about all of your colors being completely even. This is motion in water, and skies don't stay the same for very long. So if you've got a little bit what looks like clouds or something in your sky, that's a nice effect as well. So remember, this is just a piece of paper, or if you're using a canvas, it's just a canvas. This is just a project for us to try something new. Try another subject. Next week again will be 2 different subjects. Every week something different. All right, so if you've got that on there, now we're going to start to work with the water. And we're going to go around the outside of the Orca. This time I'm going to do wet paint on dry. So I'm starting with a really dark, it's the same color. This is the ultramarine blue, all the way up, right across that line. I want it fairly dark. So I've got my top line. So we're going to start to add this ultramarine blue. It's going from dark at the top line to lighter. This is water. As I said, water moves, so don't worry about whether or not it's completely even in all places. We are going to paint this Orca, the outside, most of it, except underneath. We're going to paint most of it black. But we'll just go ahead and paint all the way around. Now follow that Orca with your brush where it's coming out of the water, and we'll just do the outsides. So leave that center white for now. So just try to have your water go from side to side, your brush strokes.
Pretty, how beautiful.
And continue down the bottom below that line. There is a line at the bottom. So continue on below that line. all the way down to the bottom corners. So that line that we've penciled in underneath is our line to show where the orca has come out of the water and where it's going to re-enter the water. So that's a good guide for us to follow. Now I want to give this water in the bottom a little more motion, a little more texture. Whale has just come out of the water, and so it's got lots of movement in the water. I'm not going to do a specific line. I don't want a straight line. I just want some wiggly lines in the water. And it's okay if we're doing this and it's still wet and it starts to look like it's blending or starring a little bit. And I can take a couple and just put them on that line, just to help that line disappear a little bit. And that's probably started to dry a little bit already. And so I'm going to take fresh ultramarine blue and just touch just a few dots here and there, not overdoing it, but just a few, just to give a little more depth or a little extra to the waves. The reason we can do that is because when you put the watercolor on in the first place, it dried quite light. And then you put the next one on and it dried a little bit lighter, but it's still darker than the one underneath. And then we're putting fresh on top. So it's going to give almost a 3D look to the water. And I've also done work down in this area first before we get to our orca, just to allow that blue to dry. So try not to add any additional glue up above, only down below. So let this dry so that when we start to paint up here, it's not going to run and bleed into the other colors. A couple more steps to the water before we move on. I'm going to put black on my tray and add water so I have a gray, a very light gray. I'm going to add a little bit of that gray just at the beginning and the end of my waves. I'm going to go right over top, but it's more at the beginning and the end. I'm giving that little bit of gray. And with the same gray, I've got a big body coming out of the water. And so it's going to, because the black of the orca is going to reflect into the water, I'm going to give a reflection of that. We've also got a nose going to come back into the water. And so we're going to give a little reflection at the front. So this is going to dry, and we can add some more white to that just to give it a little bit more dimension once it's dry. So if you were able just to put a little bit of gray at the beginning and the back end of your little waves in the water. And I've got a big dark dot, and so I'm just going to use my tip of my brush just to touch off that dark color. If it's too dark, I can lift that off just by touching on it.
Are you making yours very wet and that's why it's dripping?
It's a light gray and it's wet, yes. But I just picked off the extra, so we're not finished with the gray shadow in the water. But if you're able to put that shadow in, if it runs, that's fine. We do want it to be a shadow going down into the water. Now we're just about at half time, so I'm going to read the card for today, and the card is May You Know Space, and this is from the May You Know Joy meditation cards for everyday living. So, may you know space. Space is generous and it expands in the absence of tension. Embrace your own space and create a space that you're happy to be in. There is so much freedom there. Pause. Breathe and know that you are accepting the vastness of the universe. It is in you and all around you. May you know space. Like this orca knows space. He creates his own space. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead with the Chinese white, with my paintbrush still, and I'm going to create or fill in that space between the water and the orca. So I'm starting to fill in, leaving where I've drawn that line where the orca's body is, but I'm just filling in the space between water, shadow, and the whale. I'm just painting that in. It looks a little bit gray, but that's my white. So I painted that white. Yes, it is white. So from the bottom where the jagged line is to the water edge, this area that was left white, it looks a little bit on the gray side. It's called Chinese white. It is actually white. So that's what I'm filling in, that in white. Our orca has an eye above a little white patch on its face, and the patch below that white patch, we're going to paint to the top of the nose black, but there is a white space at the bottom as well. So the fins and the body and the top of the head are white, or sorry, are black, but we're leaving that little space, and the eye, we're going to leave it white. So this is just black. So it's not a watered down black. This is solid black or quite thick black. If you need to keep going back in to your paint and getting more color, then do that. But just leave that little eye open and leave that white patch. And this will take a few minutes. This is you want to be sure that you're filling in all of the places. So with the blue background and the different tones of a blue that you put on there for the ocean or for the water that it's in, This orca is really going to stand out. So we'll go all the way up to the top of the fin. So take your time doing this. Take a deep breath. I was talking to someone this morning. We were talking about different colors. And if you're looking to do a sky color on a sunny day with clouds in the sky and trees, cobalt is a lovely blue color to put in your sky. Ultramarine is a darker color. That's why we used it for this painting, because it's the ocean. So it's a deeper color. So you're even coming down into those little cutouts on the body and painting the black in there. Just a reminder, take a deep breath, drop those shoulders.
Cathy, what's the trick to getting the black so nice and smooth rather than it looking so limey?
I added just every now and then I just added just a touch of water, so it wasn't thick paint. I'm not sure, it depends on the paint that you're using. I'm not sure if you need to add more water or less water. Yeah, now you might find, Brenda, that when you're going over that, you're starting to lift off paint, so let it dry first. But add it, maybe just add a second coat before we're finished. Now, because watercolor dries 20 to 30% lighter than when we put it on, my gray going into the water underneath the whale looks really faded. And so I want to darken that up a little bit, but I'm not going to go over the whole thing, the whole mark that's there. I'm using just a little bit darker gray. And I'm just going to put some lines just to give motion to the water underneath. Now that's too liney, so I don't want it to look like painted on lines. I just want it to look like that water is flowing. So I can just brush that from side to side and it just thins that out a little bit. So we want it to look like a shadow in the water. The next step we're going to do is with our toothbrush. So I'm taking my toothbrush, I'm going to dip it in clear water. I'm going to fill my toothbrush with white paint. So I'm rubbing it around so that the whole toothbrush has white paint on it. And before I get too carried away, I'm going to cover up with paper towel. If you've got your canvas sitting in front of you, you don't need to tape on. You can just lay a couple of pieces of paper towel down in front. So these are the spots where I don't want to get the white paint. So I'm covering those up. And I don't want it on myself either. So I'm going to do this very carefully. Maybe you'll see. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to pull the bristles back and let them flick the paint onto my Orca. So this is the effect that I've got so far. So I'll go back and I'll get some more white paint, fill my brush again. And if it feels too wet, I'm going to tap it, just tap it on my paper towel. And then again, I'm going to go back onto my Orca. And I'm going to flick with my toothbrush. See, I've got some more splashes. They're going into the water. They're going just over the front. They're on the top fin. They're on the bottom fin. And I'm going to continue because I want a lot of it at the bottom where the whale is coming out of the water. If some of your splashes are bigger, that's okay. Some are smaller, that's okay. Now, once I have that on there, some of the water that's coming up, the color is still in the water. And so I'm going to take, this is my number 3 brush with ultramarine blue, and I'm going to, on a sideways angle, I'm just going to touch, so I need some actual paint on there, with ultramarine blue. I'm just going to put a few marks of water dripping. And with the fresh, wet paint, it will start to blend. Then I'm coming back with a little bit more white on top of that so that it really starts to blend in. Let's get a little bit in there. I want it to go in the same direction. The whale is coming out of the water. I've got a little bit of white running, just a little bit, and so I'm going to use that in the water, just with my brush. And so we've got a good lift of the body coming out. Now I've lost a little bit of this fin because of the white, so I'm going to go back with black and just touch that up just a little bit. If I've lost little pieces of black and I want those to show up, I'm just going to touch on them a little bit. And if you do too much, you can always go back with the black or with the white spray. And with white, with my brush, I want to do a few lines on the dolphin, just with the white. That it gives the spray a bit of direction, the water. The black has run. I did put white, but it's picked up. I'm just going to tap that off. It's white. It's white lines, but some of it's been picked up by the, because it was wet, it's run a little bit. So I'm just going to tap that with paper towel. And I'll add a little bit of white in a moment. And I'm coming in with a little bit of fresh black just at the top of that line where my shadow starts, just not completely black, but a little bit darker. And a little bit of dark at the back where Orca is coming out of the water. I'm just going to add a few extra splashes, a little bit bigger. Just with my brush, just a little bit bigger up the top.
Are those black splashes or gray?
No, they're, well, it hit the black, but they are white splashes up the top. These little
Okay.
dots up here.
Okay.
These are white, but I picked up a little bit of black, but it's not a bad thing. So I'm just using the tip of my brush with white and just putting on in the blue just a few extra dots, a little bit bigger. We can give that water, if you're this far, we can give that water up top a little bit more motion. So I'm just taking a brush with clear water and just adding a little bit of ultramarine blue with water. And then I'm just going to go from side to side, just with my brush, just a wet brush and light paint. And I'm just going from side to side, missing my Orca and staying away from my dots. I don't want to affect the water splashes. I'm just going to add a little bit more motion in the water. Now the edge of the water at the very top where sky and water meet, I'm going to go back over because watercolor has dried, it's just that much lighter. I'm going to go back with that dark, fresh ultramarine blue. And I'm going to give a line all the way across, trying to follow my line as straight as possible. Water is self-leveling, so we want to have a straight line where water, the horizon, and the sky meet. Sometimes it's great to do this with a piece of tape or a ruler. I'm just going to graduate that down just a little bit. Pull it down a little. And last step, you'll need to decide where you're going to put your artist signature. So please sign your art when you're looking for it on the collage. Sometimes it's difficult to find your own, so signing it helps. And there's your Orca. I was going to say ochre. There's the Orca, and that's what you can do in 1 hour. Bye-bye.